Hello, my name is Ava Rogers, and I'm going to do a course summary of my criminology course. To start with the first objective, it involves expressing fundamental communication theories and models when applied to interviews and interrogations, and describing differences between the two processes. So for interviews, a bit more casual, you build a rapport with the client, make yourself and them more trustworthy. It's more non-accusatory. You can also take notes to reference back to later, and you have that psychological advantage over them in a way to where, again, they feel that trustworthiness from you and are willing to give up more information. And here you learn more significant info about their take in the case. An interrogation, on the other hand, is made to determine who is the guilty party. You want to compare the information of the interrogation to the information from the interview. So therefore, it's going to be a lot more accusatory. And obtain a possible confession if you can. Second objective was to generate research data from diverse sources and evaluate it. So you can obtain information from the offense itself, being the date, time, location, and the injury. You can get information from a suspect. It could be their background information, sex, name, appearance, any tattoos, mental health, physical health, any substance abuse problems, the relationship to the victim, if they had an alibi, if they had any motives, etc. You can also get information from or about the victim, being the nature of their harm, their age, their sex, their marital status, family, friends, financial status, physical and mental health, substance abuse there as well, and any potential blackmail material that could be used against them, or that they could use against someone else that may make that a possible motive in their case. The third objective was to analyze verbal and nonverbal statements, determine possible motives. And so it matters what they say, yes, but also the tone of their voice, the avoidance of eye contact, shifting of hands or fidgeting, and other nonverbal potentialities. Fourth objective was to obtain background information and prepare a line of questioning for mock scenarios. This, of course, I learned especially during the mock trial. I was able to initially read the information and then continuously evaluate the data. And then ask questions to cover every topic, like who, what, when, where, why, how, the time frame, appearances, identity, etc., for both discussing with my partner and by addressing the witness after the mock trial. The fifth objective was to demonstrate ability to generate, develop, organize, and convey original questions. So I discussed how, depending on what information you're trying to gather, it's going to determine how you phrase the question. For example, if you want more of a narrative case and more details, you're going to have a open-ended question to where your suspect or client can actually answer it and give their perspective, as opposed to a closed question where you're more saying yes or no, did this happen, typically used in a more accusatory nature. Sixth objective was to apply effective interpersonal interaction strategies, and I just talked about how you always want to remain respectful when starting interviews to, again, build up that strong rapport between you and the client, and just be friendly, objective, try to separate them from the crime when you first interact and to avoid overall miscommunications. The seventh objective was to use legal aspects of interrogation to obtain usable statements. Here I really focused on making sure you explicitly state your Miranda rights and you ask and acknowledge that they understand what is being asked of them and they know their rights. Otherwise, information or confessions will not be able to be used in court. And avoid explicitly leading questions or mentally confusing questions that might, confuse the client. And also use language they will understand and not like a certain jargon that is too unfamiliar with them. The eighth objective was to prepare a written analysis of interviews in relation to the investigation, and I think that writing my paper, my deposition, really helped me organize all of my thoughts and evidence to a coherent statement and analysis that covers every inch of the case in really intense detail. And this was especially helpful after getting the notes from the mock trial. I was recording some during the interview, and that was able to shift over into other aspects of the project. I wrote down all the information provided, and it also helped slow my speaking pace when talking to the client, which I think overall helped how much information they were willing to give up, essentially, because they were more comfortable and relaxed and not being accused over and over again of a certain crime. The ninth objective was to understand the concepts, techniques that make up effective public speaking. I wanted to focus on determining my arguments to make in my case to give me more confidence and organization of where my thoughts are going. arrange the speech to appropriate format. Depending on what audience you're addressing, you're going to want to change maybe your jargon, how you're speaking, how fast you're speaking even, your tone. Practice speech repeatedly to get it as close to perfection as possible, and also pay attention to the delivery. I would record myself to review how I was not only saying my speech, but moving, while that body language is just as important as my verbal tone. The 10th objective was to demonstrate the ability to effectively communicate to a public audience their findings. And so again, the deposition was really efficient here. It helped me understand this whole concept in general, I believe. I'm able to better gather my facts from the original case in the interview or interrogation and prepare my own line of questioning and be prepared for what a potential opposing attorney might ask or question my client, or to discredit them, in which I can then respond appropriately for. Overall, you want to be confident, you want to be professional, and you want to be honest. That's going to help your case in front of a jury. And then 3 things that I learned in this class. A lot of it was, my first was compounding questions. In my mind, I didn't think about, I guess, the negative effects of compounding questions and how that could lead to someone kind of avoiding answering the question directly. In my mind, it was more like, well, since they're all relatively about the same topic, let's just go ahead and ask them. So that was really intriguing. Also, grand versus petite juries. I was really unfamiliar with the details of the two. I think I kind of knew somewhere in the back of my mind where there's a difference between the process, but I didn't know what it was. So learning at grand juries were to determine there's enough evidence versus like not if they're guilty or innocent. Like a petite jury was really interesting to me. And recently I learned a lot more on writing a testimony. Again, in media, I'm sure, or just a couple of readings in my law classes, you see how the court works and how the systems go through the processing. But it was interesting to actually write down and go through it myself to go, okay, here's my testimony, here's my direct testimony, and so how am I going to respond to a cross-examination from another attorney, and how am I going to respond to any leading questions to make sure that you remain composed, as your behavior and your image really impacts you and your client. And so to keep yourself and them credible, you must remain professional. And so really that was really interesting, just not just learning about it, but being able to actively put my thoughts and myself into my assignment was really intriguing, and I had an amazing time this semester. Thank you so much.